Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we're going to be going over the all-new 2022 Subaru WRX. Now I already made a video about the 22 WRX, but that was before we had all of this confirmed information. Now we have the confirmed specs. So with all that being said, in the first part of the video we're going to go over the confirmed information. Then we're going to get into why this new WRX is important, my overall thoughts on it, on whether or not you should look into purchasing one, and with all that being said, let's get into the video. So let's talk about the specs on this new 2022 Subaru WRX. First off, let's start things off under the hood. So you're gonna be able to get either a 6-speed manual, yes, good thing they did that, or a CVT automatic. Sad that they're still doing that, but it is what it is. And paired to those transmissions is a turbocharged 2.4 liter flat 4-cylinder, and it's good for 271 horsepower, 258 pound-feet of torque. So we get 3 more horsepower from last year's turbocharged 2-liter flat 4-cylinder, because that was 268 horsepower. So a little bit, well, I won't comment on that yet. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But yeah, 3 more horsepower basically out of a much larger engine, all things considered. Now, moving from that, they actually have also changed some things to make the new WRX handle better. So what they're doing is they're mounting the stabilizer bar directly to the body instead of the subframe, and apparently this is going to get rid of quite a bit of body roll, which you guys know that was a huge complaint when I reviewed the WRX and also the STI, especially compared to other rally cars like the Honda Civic Type R and the Focus RS. They don't really have any body roll. And then you get into an STI or a WRX and you're like, ooh, all over the place, and you're like, is this a Baja vehicle? Because yeah, it's pretty bad. Now, aside from that, they're also apparently doing dual pinion electric power steering for the rack, so it should make steering feel a little bit better. It'll never be as good as the hydraulic rack that is in the previous generation STIs, so yeah, it's a move, I guess, in the right direction, but also in the wrong direction. They should just have stuck with hydraulic. But anyways, moving from that, where you're either going to be able to get 17 or 18-inch wheels. You can get summer performance tires. They're not super aggressive like what you could get on the STI. And again, it makes sense. It's the WRX. They're going to kind of neuter things a little bit because it's not the top-of-the-line performance variant. Moving on from that, we do get a new trim package. It's called the GT model. It's kind of like your top of the line, so it's going to have really nice Recaro seats, and of course it happens. Boom. Really nice Recaro seats. It's also going to have adaptive dampers as well. You're going to have comfort, normal, and sport for the different drive modes, and that'll change the suspension as well. One thing I will say from owning a Focus RS, and hopefully they figure this out, is a lot of times these adaptive dampers don't really do all that much. Like, you don't really feel like you're getting a car that handles better, but it feels a lot rougher, especially on regular roads. So hopefully they figure that out so it doesn't feel like super rough and you actually get better handling versus, yeah, what I have experienced in my Focus RS at least. And also that GT model will come with matte gray wheels, 18-inch, looks pretty cool, but again, you guys are probably just going to put aftermarket wheels on this WRX anyway, so who cares. Get Subaru's big infotainment system. It's just under 12 inches, so pretty cool setup with that. And then you guys saw the new gauge cluster as well, and this is annoying. Don't have long eyelashes, people. It is not worth it. Yeah, so really good infotainment system, really good gauge cluster, and we kind of saw that with the first video. Harman Kardon sound system, that's something that Subaru's been using for quite some time, so nothing's really changing there. Overall, the interior, and you guys will see pictures throughout, the interior looks really nice, looks modern, especially with the Recaro seats. Those look great, so if you can afford that package, I'd recommend going for it because they look cool. And I've always been a fan of Recaros. I have them in my Focus RS that I'm trying to get rid of right now. I had them in my Gen 2 Raptor, and I also had a Shelby GT350 that had them. So I've had 3 vehicles that have had Recaro seats, and I've loved it every single time. They're just like, they're comfortable, but then they hold you in place really well, and so yeah, big fan of Recaro seats. And then aside from that, let's actually talk about the exterior styling a little bit. So yeah, the memes are right. It looks like a Subaru Crosstrek on the front end, but then the taillights look like the new BRZ. So it's kind of like, it's this like mixed bag. It's weird. Yeah, it really does, like, especially since they did a bunch of like plastic on the bottom portion and kind of like that two-tone look. It really looks like a Crosstrek from the front end perspective, which, yeah. I'm just gonna leave that there. And then yeah, the back end, I don't know how to feel about it. Like, I'm sure when I see it in person, I'll like it a lot more. But from these pictures, I mean, it looks better, I think, than the last WRX, but I wouldn't call it beautiful. So it's better, but it's not, it's still kind of ugly. But that's just my personal opinion. Take that for what it is. But yeah, those are the specs on the WRX. So now let's get into why this car matters and my opinions on it. Okay, let's get into why this new WRX matters, and if my eye looks funny, I literally just pulled out like 6 eyelashes. It's crazy today. Again, don't have long eyelashes. It is not worth it. But anyways, why this car matters. Of course, this is the first new WRX we've gotten in quite some time, right? We had the newer version of the last generation release for like the 2015, 2014 model year, something like that. So it's been quite some time. It's always exciting when we get a new WRX. And obviously this particular segment is kind of like a dying segment. There's not a lot of like smaller performance cars that offer manual transmissions. Everyone has kind of like gone to trucks and SUVs, and then they've gone away from manual transmission. So like we have a manual transmission, four-door, fun car. So yeah, it's just special all in its own right. So yeah, that's the importance, because there's not that many of them left. But moving from that to my personal opinion on it. So like I said, exterior styling, I think it looks a little bit better than the previous generation, but I still think it's kind of an ugly looking car. I was never a fan of the WRX, to be honest, especially since they got rid of the hatchback, and sadly we're not going to get a hatchback of this. Subaru says they're just going to do a sedan, and so again, that's just kind of my opinion. I don't think it's like horrendously ugly, right? I just think that it's not necessarily like a car that I look at and I'm like, oh wow, that is really beautiful. It's just like, wow, that kind of looks kind of interesting, and some parts of it look cool and some parts of it look funny. But yeah, overall, I think it's okay looking. Again, looking at the pictures, I don't know, it's always hard to tell, because when you see it in person, it's always like a much bigger difference than when you see just pictures of a car. Moving from that to the interior, obviously getting all the interior updates I think is great. Big infotainment system, obviously has a nice sound system. Cargo seats, I'm a huge fan of those. And from an interior perspective, I definitely think, like, especially considering the price point that the WRX is typically at, I think the interior is great on it. So I think that they did a really good job with that. But let's get into the performance, and this is the most disappointing part. Like, Subaru obviously is conservative, but like this is ridiculously conservative. I mean, 3 extra horsepower, and it's an engine that's 0.4 liters bigger. I mean, it's crazy. We all know that engine can put out so much more power than that. So Subaru should have done something like at least 300 horsepower, and that's what we were hoping for, at least 300 horsepower. I mean, Hyundai sells the Elantra N-Line, which is just like a front-wheel drive commuter car, and it has more power than the WRX. I mean, you're gonna get like beat by Toyota Camrys and, you know, Honda Accords in this new WRX, probably, if you race them at a street light, especially if you get the CVT. But yeah, so power obviously is disappointing. Having the manual transmission, though, I think that is, again, huge, so I'm glad that they kept that. I wish they would have gone for a real automatic. I'm sick of Subaru using CVTs. I get it, they're great for fuel economy, but there's just so many issues with CVTs, right? If something goes wrong with that transmission, you have to replace the whole transmission. You can't just replace a gear, because it doesn't have gears, and they're pretty expensive. And then on top of that, they're just not great for sporty driving, and the WRX is supposed to be a sporty car, so why are you putting a non-sporty transmission in it? So yeah, kind of critical on that part as well, but just being honest with that. So overall, it's still a really cool car, but I just wish Subaru would have done a few more things. I wish they would have added a real automatic instead of doing the CVT for the automatic. And I mean, look at like what Nissan's doing with the new Z. They're taking and they're giving it it has a 9-speed automatic, and so they're doing something that's quicker shifting, more modern. And I mean, if Nissan can do it with their budget, Subaru should be able to do it with their budget, because they don't change as much as Nissan, and they have a little, you know, anyways, moving on from that. So like, as an overall package, I think it's a pretty cool car, but it kind of worries me for the new STI, because we've been hearing the new STI will have like 400 horsepower, but now seeing that Subaru only increased the WRX horsepower by like 3, I'm worried that they're not really going to increase the horsepower with the STI. I'm worried it's going to be like, instead of 310 or whatever, yeah, it's like with what, 310, it's going to be like 315, 320, and it's like, big whoop. Like, they're not really giving us an incentive to buy this new car. It's like, oh, it looks a little bit better on the outside, a little bit better in the interior, but we didn't really improve the performance all that much. And so hopefully Subaru like sees everyone's reaction to this new WRX and sees how like frustrated everyone is, and they give the STI some real power before they release it. Let's cross our fingers, but at this point, I'm not too hopeful. We'll see what happens. But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts, and then obviously the importance on the WRX as well. Now that's going to sum things up for today's video, going over the all-new 2022 WRX and talking about the STI a little bit. And again, let's cross your fingers that they give it a 400 horsepower and they make it into a, you know, super cool rally car. But anyways, if you're stopping for the first time, please subscribe, and I'll see all of you in the next video.